In the next few minutes, you are going to make a decision to keep watching this or to leave. And it is going to feel like you made it. Like there is someone in here, behind your eyes, weighing it up and choosing. I need to show you something about that someone. In 1983, a scientist named Benjamin Libet wired people up to an EEG and asked them to do the simplest free act you can imagine. Flick your wrist. Whenever you feel like it. No cue, no signal, no rush. Just watch a little dot moving around a clock face and note the exact instant you decided to move. Simple. Except the result broke something. Their brains committed to the movement about half a second before they were aware of choosing it. The decision was already rolling before they knew anything about it. The conscious choice was not the cause of the movement. It was a bulletin, arriving late, announcing a decision that had already been made somewhere they could not see, by something they could not feel.
For decades, people waved this away. Fine, half a second. That is just a quirk of the equipment, a lab trick, a rounding error in the machinery of the self. And then, in 2008, it got worse. Much worse. By the end of this video, you are going to understand why a Stanford neuroscientist, a serious one, not a provocateur, now argues that no human being has ever, not once, been truly responsible for anything they have ever done. And, stranger still, why he thinks that accepting this might be the most humane thing our species could ever learn to do. This one has an uncomfortable ending. I am not saying that to bait you. I am saying it the way you would warn a friend before showing them something they cannot unsee. Let us go. So here is where all of this comes from, because I want to be honest with you from the start. I am not a neuroscientist. I am not a philosopher. I am a person who read a book that quietly wrecked something I had assumed my whole life, and I have not been able to put it back together since. The book is called Determined. The full title is Determined, A Science of Life Without Free Will. It came out in 2023, and it was written by a man named Robert Sapolsky. Now, if you do not know that name, Sapolsky spent something like 30 years as a professor of neurology and neurosurgery and biology at Stanford. Before that, he spent decades in Kenya, living among wild baboons, sticking blow dart tranquilizers into their backsides so he could study what stress does to a body over a lifetime. His earlier book, Behave, is this 900-page monster that tries to explain every human action by walking backwards through time. What happened a second before you acted? Then a minute before, an hour, a year, a childhood, an evolution. People treat that book like a Bible. And I want to be straight with you about my relationship to this one. I do not fully want to believe it. I read Determined the way you might read a letter you already suspect contains bad news. Sapolsky writes like a man who is completely certain, and I do not always trust certainty, especially about the one thing every human being feels they know from the inside. There were pages where I wrote in the margin, "No," in big, angry letters. So this is not going to be 40 minutes of me nodding along. This is going to be 40 minutes of me trying, and mostly failing, to find the exit. Because here is the thing that makes this topic worth your evening instead of a listicle. Determined did not appear in a vacuum. In that very same year, 2023, another scientist published a book arguing the exact opposite. His name is Kevin Mitchell, a neurogeneticist at Trinity College Dublin, and his book is called Free Agents: How Evolution Gave Us Free Will. Same year,
Same evidence, more or less. Opposite conclusion. One serious scientist saying free will is a total illusion. The other saying evolution built us a real and genuine kind of freedom. And they are both looking at the same brain scans. So what you are about to watch is not a lecture. It is a live intellectual war, and I am going to walk you right into the middle of the crossfire. Remember Mitchell. He is going to matter later, when the ground has fallen out from under us and we are looking for something to hold on to. I am parking him here on purpose. We will come back for him. All right, beat 1. Let us go back to that wrist. The signal Libet measured has a name. It is called the readiness potential. It is a slow buildup of electrical activity in a part of the brain that handles movement, and it starts rising before you move. That part was already known. What Libet added was the clock, the way of pinning down the exact moment a person felt they had decided. And when he lined them up, the readiness potential came first, by about 550 milliseconds. Then, later, came the feeling of having chosen. Then, later still, the wrist moved. Read that order again, because it is the whole ballgame. The brain begins. Then you feel like you begin. Then the body moves. The feeling of deciding is not sitting at the front of the process, pulling the lever. It is sitting in the middle of the process, watching the lever move and taking the credit. It is like a man who runs to the front of a parade that is already marching and grabs a baton and starts waving it and genuinely believes he is leading the whole thing. Now, you might stop me right here, and you would be right to, because there are 100 reasonable objections to Libet, and I am going to hand you the best one myself, because I do not want you sitting there thinking you have spotted a hole I am hiding. The best objection is this. Flicking your wrist for no reason is a stupid, trivial, contentless act. There is nothing to decide, so of course the timing is a mess. When you decide whether to leave your marriage, or take the job, or forgive your father, you are not flicking a wrist. You are doing something that takes weeks, that involves reasons, memory, values, argument with yourself at 3 a.m. Surely that is different. Surely that is where the real you lives. Hold that thought. Genuinely hold it. Because it is the strongest card you have, and I want it face up on the table for the rest of this video. We are going to test whether it survives. But first, I have to tell you what happened in 2008, because this is where the lab trick stopped looking like a lab trick. A team led by a researcher named John Dylan Haynes ran a version of Libet's experiment, except instead of an EEG catching the surface crackle of the brain, they used fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, the machine that lets you watch blood flow deep inside a living brain while it works. And they upgraded the task. Now the person had 2 buttons, one under the left hand, one under the right, and they could press whichever one they wanted, whenever they wanted. A real little choice, left or right, free as anything. And the researchers watched the brain. Here is where it gets genuinely strange, so I want you to actually sit with this next number rather than let it slide past. They found patterns of activity in the frontal and parietal cortex, deep, early activity, that let them predict which button the person would press. Not milliseconds ahead, up to 7, in some cases 10 seconds before the person felt they had decided. Let me make that concrete, because seconds is an abstraction, and I want it in your body. Imagine you and I are sitting across a table. You have 2 buttons. I have a screen showing your brain. And I lean over and I tell you, calmly, you are about to press the left one. And then I count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and somewhere in there, you feel a little spark of choice arrive. Fresh, and yours, and free. And your finger comes down on the left button. Exactly like the stranger reading your scan told you it would, before you knew it yourself. That is what they measured. A person in another chair looking at a picture of your brain, knowing your free choice several seconds before it arrives in you as a feeling. Now, the prediction was not perfect. It was around 60%, when chance would be 50%. So this is not a crystal ball, and anyone who tells you it is has oversold it. But think about what even an imperfect prediction means. It means the information about your choice is physically sitting in your brain in a readable form before there is any you present to have made it. The decision exists as a fact about your neurons before it exists as an experience in your mind. The you who feels the choice arrive is downstream. You are the last to know. When I first read this, I did the thing you are probably doing right now. I started arguing. 60% is barely better than a coin flip. The delay might be an artifact of the slow blood signal. Left versus right is still trivial. And those objections are all fair, and smart people have made all of them in print, and the debate is real and ongoing, and I am not going to pretend it is settled. But something had shifted in me, and maybe in you too. Because it is one thing to say the feeling of choosing arrives half a second late in a wrist flick. It is another to watch the choice sitting there, legible, in the tissue, seconds before the self shows up to claim it. The lab trick was starting to look less like a trick and more like a window. And then I found the twist that seemed to save everything. And I want to tell you about it honestly, because for about a day, it gave me my free will back. And then I understood what it actually meant. And it was so much worse. This is beat 3, and this one has a villain and a rescue. Except the rescue turns out to be the villain, wearing a nicer coat. In 2012, a neuroscientist named Aaron Scherger published a reinterpretation of Libet's readiness potential, and it landed like a lifeline. Here's the idea. Scherger suggested that the readiness potential is not a hidden decision quietly forming below awareness. It is just noise. Your brain is never silent. It is always fizzing with random, spontaneous fluctuations of activity, up and down, like the surface of a pot of water just before it boils. And when you are sitting there, waiting to flick your wrist for no particular reason, all you are really doing is waiting for one of those random upward fluctuations to happen to cross a threshold. When it crosses, you move. The readiness potential is not the ghost of a decision. It is just the random tide happening to come in. And when I first read that, I exhaled, because it seemed to dissolve the whole nightmare. It says, there is no sinister hidden decider making up your mind before you. There is just noise. Libet measured static, not a puppeteer. I want you to notice how good that feels for a second, before I ruin it. Because here is the problem. And it is the kind of problem that makes you put the book down and stare at the wall. If your action was triggered by random neural noise crossing a threshold, then you did not choose it either. Randomness is not freedom. A dice roll is not a decision. Think about what you actually want when you say, I chose this. You want it to have come from you, from your reasons, your values, the person you are. You do not want it to have come from a coin flip in your skull that you had no control over. If a random fluctuation fired your wrist, then the wrist flick belongs to the noise, not to you. It is still not yours. So look at the two options Sugar left us with.
Either there was a hidden process that decided before you were aware of it, in which case you were not the author, some earlier machinery was, or it was random noise that happened to cross a line, in which case you were not the author, chance was. Do you see the trap? Every road out of that room leads to the same place, determined or random, puppet or dice. And here is the thing nobody tells you when you are young and first hear the phrase, free will. Neither one of those is you. Neither one gives you what you actually wanted, which was to be the true origin of your own act. Predictable does not give it to you. Random does not give it to you. You have traded a puppet master for a dice roll and thrown a party about the upgrade, and neither of them is holding the pen. I sat with that for a while, and I want to be honest, this was the moment the video I thought I was making, a fun little tour of some spooky brain experiments, quietly died.
Because I realized the lab equipment was never the point. Libet, Haynes, Sugar, the milliseconds, the seconds, the fMRI, all of that is just the doorway. The house behind the door is much, much bigger. And this is where Sapolsky stops being a neuroscientist reporting experiments and becomes something closer to a man delivering a verdict. Here is the turn. This is the part where it stops being about lab equipment and becomes about you. Sapolsky's real argument is not any single experiment. His real argument is a question, and the question is a chain, and once you see the chain, you cannot look away from it. So let us actually walk it, together, right now. Pick a decision. Any decision you have made recently. Something small. What you had for breakfast. Whether you texted someone back. Fine. Now let us ask where it came from. That choice came out of your brain in the state it was in at that moment. Agreed? The brain does the deciding. Even Mitchell, our defender, agrees with that.
There is no choosing happening outside the brain. Good. So now ask, why was your brain in that particular state? Well, because of the state it was in 1 second earlier, and a minute earlier. And your brain 1 minute earlier was shaped by the hormones flooding your bloodstream that morning, whether you were stressed, whether you had slept, whether your blood sugar was crashing. And your hormone levels that morning were shaped by what has been happening in your life these past months, the chronic stress or the calm, and that was shaped by the years before it. Your adolescence, which physically sculpted your frontal cortex, the part that handles judgment and impulse, a part, by the way, that is not even finished building until your mid-20s. And your adolescence was shaped by your childhood, the love or the neglect, whether you were held,
and your childhood was shaped by the womb you gestated in. Because we now know that the level of stress hormone in your mother's blood while she was pregnant physically tuned the brain you would be born with. And that was shaped by your mother's life and her culture and her poverty or her wealth. And underneath all of it, the whole way down, are your genes, which you did not pick, handed to you by ancestors you never met, carrying the fingerprints of a culture built up over thousands of years by people who were themselves just links in the same chain. Now here is Sapolsky's question, the one I cannot get around, the one I have tried and tried to get around. Show me the crack. Show me the single moment, the single neuron in that entire chain that acted free of everything that came before it. Point to the place where you, the real, free, uncaused you, reached in and made it go differently. Independent of your genes, your hormones, your childhood, your culture, the whole standing weight of the history of the universe behind you. Where is that place? Because Sapolsky's claim is that there isn't one. There is no crack anywhere in the chain. It is turtles all the way down, cause under cause under cause, with no floor and no gap and no secret room where a free author gets to sit, sovereign, untouched by everything that made him. The whole history of the cosmos is standing behind the thought you are having right now, and behind the previous one, and behind the one where you decide what to make of this video. That is the moment my stomach dropped. Not at any experiment, at the chain. Because I could feel, as he built it, that I did not have a good answer. Every time I reached for the free part, the part that was really me, really mine, really uncaused, I found more causes.
I found my father's temper in my temper. I found my mother's anxiety in my anxiety. I found the culture I was raised in sitting inside my most private, most personal, most "this is just who I am" reactions. There was no bottom. There was no me underneath the causes. There were only more causes wearing my face. And I will be honest, if ideas like this are the kind of thing that keeps you awake at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling, then sticking around here is probably a good move. Because this channel is basically one long expedition into exactly these rooms, the ones most people keep the door shut on. And where we are going next is stranger than where we have been. Okay, back into it. Now, you are smart, and you have been building objections this whole time, and I promised you I would not dodge them. So let us take the escape hatches one by one, because I tried all of them, and I want to save you the disappointment of trying them yourself. Escape hatch number 1. Quantum mechanics. Surely, at the very bottom of physics, things are not fully determined. There is real randomness down there, genuine indeterminacy, the universe rolling actual dice. So maybe that is where freedom sneaks in. Maybe my free will lives in the quantum wiggle. But look what happens when you actually reach for it. Even if quantum randomness bubbles up and nudges a neuron, and it is far from clear it does in any meaningful way, you have just handed your decision to a random event. And we already did this dance with Schrödinger. Random is not free. If a quantum coin flip in your neurons tipped you toward the left button, then the quantum coin flip made the choice, not you. You wanted to be the author. A dice roll in your synapse is not you being the author. It is you being the weather. Randomness does not rescue freedom. It just replaces one thing that is not you with a different thing that is not you. Escape hatch number 2. Chaos theory.
The brain is a fantastically complex system, and complex systems are unpredictable. Tiny differences in starting conditions blow up into wildly different outcomes. The famous butterfly flapping its wings and causing a storm on the other side of the world. So maybe the brain is unpredictable, and unpredictable means free. No. And this one is subtle, so stay with me. Unpredictable and free are two completely different things, and we constantly confuse them. The weather is chaotic. The weather is unpredictable more than a couple of weeks out. Nobody thinks the weather is free. Nobody thinks a hurricane chose to make landfall. A system can be utterly impossible to predict and still be 100% the product of its prior causes. Chaos does not add a free author. It just adds fog. It makes the determinism harder to see. That is not the same as making it go away. You have not found freedom. You have found that you cannot compute the outcome in advance, which is a fact about you, not about the freedom of the system. And escape hatch number 3, which is the deepest one and the one I clung to longest. Fine, you might say. Fine. Forget the single neuron. Zoom out. The whole me, the entire person, with my values and my reasons and my sense of who I am, that whole system does the choosing. Do not stare at one neuron and say it is not free. Look at me, the entire organism, deliberating. That is where the freedom is. In the whole. And this is a genuinely good move. It is close to what our defender, Mitchell, is going to argue. But here is Sapolsky's reply, and it is quiet, and it is devastating. That whole self, the values, the reasons, the sense of who you are, what is it made of? It is made of the same caused stuff. Your values did not descend from heaven. You did not choose your values from some neutral standpoint before you had any values.
Your values were installed in you by your genes and your childhood and your culture and every experience you ever had, none of which you selected. Your reasons are the reasons a person with your particular caused history would find persuasive. The self you want to appeal to as the free chooser is itself just more of the river. And that is the image that finally got me. You cannot stand on the bank of the river and steer it, because you are not standing on the bank. You are made of the water. There is no you outside the current, dry and sovereign, reaching in to redirect the flow. The you that would do the choosing is the flow. It is caused all the way through, top to bottom, values and all. You are not the pilot of the river. You are a particular swirl the river is making at this particular bend, and the swirl is composed entirely of the water and the rocks and the slope, none of which the swirl chose, and behind which stands every drop of rain that ever fell into that watershed.
Let that settle in for a moment. Because if that is right, if there is no dry place to stand, then the strongest objection you have been holding since the very beginning of this video, the one I told you to keep face up on the table, is in serious trouble. Remember it? Sure, the wrist flick is trivial, but real decisions are different. That is where the real me lives. But we just walked through a real decision. We walked it all the way back. And we did not find a real free you at the bottom of it. We found your mother's stress hormones and your genes and a culture built by strangers. The big, weighty, meaningful decisions did not say free will. They just have longer causal chains. The chain is longer, so it feels more like yours. But a longer chain is still a chain. Okay, I have been building the prosecution's case for 20 minutes, and I promised you this was a war, not a lecture. So now I owe you the defense.
And it is a real defense, made by serious people. And if you are looking for a place to plant your feet, this is the most solid ground on offer. Bring in Mitchell. Kevin Mitchell, in Free Agents, does not deny the chain. He is a geneticist. He knows about genes and causes better than most. What he denies is the sleight of hand in the middle of it. Sapolsky, he would say, keeps zooming down to the single neuron and saying, look, it is not free, it just obeys physics, and then concluding that the whole person is not free. But that is like staring at a single water molecule, noting that it has no wetness, and concluding that the ocean cannot be wet. Wetness is a property of the whole, not the part. And Mitchell argues that agency is exactly the same kind of thing. It is a property of the whole organism, built up over billions of years of evolution. And you cannot make it disappear just by pointing out that each individual piece is following physics.
Here is his positive story, and I find it genuinely beautiful, whether or not it is true. Evolution did not build brains for fun. It built them to make decisions. A creature that could hold several possible futures in mind, weigh them against its own goals, and select, That creature ate and survived and had children. Over billions of years, natural selection built organisms that are genuine causes in the world. Not passive billiard balls that get hit and move. Systems with internal models, with purposes, with goals of their own, that take in information and act on it in ways that serve those goals. And Mitchell says, that is what free will actually is. Not some magic exemption from physics. The hard-won evolutionary capacity of a whole organism to be a real cause of its own behavior, driven by its own reasons. And notice, this pairs with a third figure I should bring in, the philosopher Daniel Dennett, who spent his career on a similar idea he called compatibilism.
Dennett's blunt accusation is that people like Sapolsky are mourning the loss of a kind of free will that was never worth wanting in the first place. A magical, uncaused, ghost-in-the-machine freedom that no serious person should have expected to find. Of course you will not find a soul reaching in from outside physics and pulling levers. There is no such thing. There never was. And its absence is not a tragedy. The free will worth having, the kind where you act for your own reasons, where you can reflect, where you could have done otherwise if you had wanted to, where you are not being coerced or compelled. That kind, Dennett says, is real, and it is sitting right in front of you, and we have spent 2,000 years overlooking it because we were sulking that it was not made of magic. So who is right? I am not going to lie to you and tell you the debate is settled, because it is not. And anyone selling you certainty here is selling you something.
Smart, honest people land on both sides. But I want you to notice the one thing that even the defenders concede. Even Mitchell, even Dennett, even the most passionate believers in free will, none of them are defending the ghost. None of them believe there is a little soul behind your eyes, uncaused, exempt from physics, reaching in from outside to pull the levers. That version, the version almost everyone secretly pictures when they say the words free will, that version is dead. Dead on all sides. The whole war is being fought over what to build in the rubble after that particular god has already fallen. And you are living in a culture and a legal system, and probably a private moral life, that is still quietly built on the ghost. Which brings us to the part that turns this from a fascinating debate into a video you argue about at dinner. Because so far, this has all been philosophy. Now it gets real. Now it gets courtrooms and prison sentences, and the person who hurt you most.
Now we ask the only question that actually matters. If any of this is true, where does blame go? Let me tell you about a school teacher. This is a real case, documented in a medical journal, the Archives of Neurology, in 2003, by two doctors named Burns and Swerdlow. I am going to be careful and clinical here, because the subject is genuinely dark, but the case is important, and I will not sensationalize it. In the year 2000, a man in his 40s, a school teacher, a married man, a man with no prior history of anything like this, abruptly developed intense and escalating sexual urges. Urges directed at children. He began collecting illegal material. He made advances toward his stepdaughter. He knew it was wrong. He described actively hiding it, fighting it, and losing. Eventually, he was arrested, convicted, and the night before he was to be sentenced to prison, he went to a hospital emergency room, complaining of a headache and a fear that he was going to hurt someone.
The doctor scanned his brain, and they found a tumor. A large one pressing on his orbitofrontal cortex, the region right behind your eyes that handles impulse control, judgment, the ability to weigh a consequence and stop yourself. They removed the tumor, and the urges went away. He went through treatment, he was deemed safe, he returned to his life. And then, about a year later, the urges came back. He returned to the hospital. They scanned him again. The tumor had regrown. They removed it a second time, and a second time the urges receded. Now sit with your own reaction to that, because your reaction is the whole point. When I tell you it was the tumor, something in you relaxes the judgment. Something in you says, well, then it was not really him. It was the tumor pressing on the part of the brain that would have let him stop. He did not choose this.
He was, in a horrible sense, a victim of a piece of his own biology that he could not see and did not ask for and could not control. We do not, most of us, want to send the tumor to prison. We want to remove the tumor. Here is Sapolsky's question, and I warned you at the start that the ending was uncomfortable, and this is the edge of it. What is the difference, the real, principled, defensible difference between that tumor and everything else? Because think about what the tumor was. It was a physical feature of his brain, which he did not choose, which he could not see, which impaired the machinery that would have let him do otherwise. Fine. Now, what is his childhood? What is a childhood of abuse which physically alters the developing brain in ways you can measure on a scan? What are the genes that load the dice toward poor impulse control? What is the prenatal flood of stress hormones that tuned his frontal cortex before he drew his first breath? What is any of it, if not a tumor you simply cannot see on the scan? A cause he did not choose, could not see, and which shaped the machinery of his choosing. The tumor is not special. That is the terrible thrust of it. The tumor is just a cause that is large enough and recent enough and photogenic enough to show up on an MRI. Sapolsky's claim is that every single one of us is running on a brain shaped entirely by tumors we cannot see. Genetic, developmental, hormonal, cultural. Every one of them a cause we did not pick, doing exactly what the visible tumor did, only slower and more diffusely and invisibly. We forgive the man with the visible tumor because we can see his cause. Sapolsky is asking us to notice that the only difference between him and everyone we blame is the resolution of the scanner. Now, and this matters because this is where people accuse Sapolsky of madness. This does not mean you let the dangerous man walk free. Sapolsky is very clear on this, and I want to be fair to him. A car with failed brakes is not morally guilty. It did not choose to have failed brakes. And yet you absolutely take it off the road. You do not let it keep driving because it is not to blame. You constrain it, you repair it if you can, you protect people from it. What changes is not what you do. What changes is the hatred, the relish, the sense that the person deserves to suffer for its own sake, that punishment is a debt the universe is collecting rather than a tool for keeping people safe. That is the peace Sapolsky wants gone. Not consequences, not protection, just the retribution, the ancient, satisfying, deep-in-the-gut certainty that they had it coming, that a free soul chose evil and now must be made to pay. And this is the cross-domain bridge that makes the whole thing land, because look at how far we have traveled. We started at a wrist flicking in a lab in 1983. We went through brain scans and quantum mechanics and chaos theory and a river you cannot climb out of. And we have arrived at a courtroom.
at the criminal justice system, at the difference between a society built around retribution, you chose evil, you must suffer, and a society built around repair. This system is dangerous and broken. Let us contain it and fix what can be fixed, and prevent it in the next person. The physics of a determined universe reaches all the way up into how we decide to treat the person who did the unforgivable thing. That is not a small bridge. That is the bridge between the lab bench and the person you cannot forgive. Because, and here is where it gets genuinely personal, and I am going to stop hiding behind the school teacher and put it where it actually lives. Think about the person who hurt you the most. You have one. Everyone does. And the story you tell about them, the story that lets you stay angry, is almost always a story about a free choice.
They knew better. They could have chosen differently. They chose to do it anyway. That freedom is the fuel. That is what makes it betrayal rather than misfortune. Now try, just as an experiment, just for a moment, to run Sapolsky's chain on them. The temper that hurt you came from somewhere. It came from a brain shaped by a childhood you never saw, by genes they did not pick, by a father who did the same thing to them, by stress hormones and a culture and 1,000 invisible tumors. I am not telling you this excuses it. I am not telling you to feel nothing, or to let them back in, or to pretend the damage did not happen. Sapolsky is not asking for that either. He is asking a smaller and stranger question. What if the freedom you have been assuming, the free, sovereign, uncaused choice to hurt you that you have built your anger around, what if that thing was never actually there?
What if there was no ghost behind their eyes either, choosing from some clean and sovereign place to do you harm? What if there was only a river, running downhill, made of water it did not choose? He thinks that if we really understood this, not intellectually, but in our bones, an enormous amount of human cruelty would simply have nothing left to stand on. Not the consequences, not the protection, just the cruelty. The hatred that we dress up as justice. And he thinks that might be the most humane thing our species ever learns. That is the case for why a world without free will could be gentler, not colder. I do not know if he is right. Some days I think he is describing paradise, and some days I think he is describing a nightmare where nothing means anything. But I cannot make the argument go away, and I have tried. So let me bring us back down, all the way back down, to where we started. To you, in your chair, right now. In a moment, you are going to decide whether to close this video. And I want you to try something with me. It is the only experiment in this whole thing that you can run yourself, with no equipment, right now. Try to catch it. Try to catch the exact instant the decision is born. Watch for it. Sit very still and wait for the moment the choice to stay or to go actually forms. The precise instant where you, the author, reach in and make it. Watch closely. I will give you a few seconds. You will not find it. I promise you that you will not find it. The choice will simply appear, already finished, fully formed, out of a place you cannot see and were never invited into. And a heartbeat later, a voice in your head will step forward, calm and certain, and it will say, "I decided that." It will take the credit the way it always does. That voice, the confident one, the one narrating your life as if it were driving, that voice is you.
It is the thing you have called I your entire life, and on the best evidence we have, it has never once been the one in charge. It arrives a half-second late, every single time, to a decision that was already made. And it stands up, and it clears its throat, and it calls itself the author. Whatever you decide next, watch how quickly the voice claims it.